everyone. I know it's not a review, and we're missing a review from Saturday. What's going on? Well, I want to give it a little update. So, I kind of took the 4th off. I was not feeling well, and I didn't have the comics I needed to have done, like, read out for a review. And it's been a long time since I read this story, so I need to fully read it out. And even if I didn't, I'd still want to read it, so it's fresh and there's more of an authenticity to it. Anyway, so this is like my mid-year update here on the Stupid Chainsaw channel. Things are going fairly good. We've gotten through a lot of stuff this year. It's been pretty impressive, especially the amount of Aliens content. So we'll start with some Aliens stuff, and I'll work through the IPs I'm working through. Aliens is going good. Wednesday, you have the Berserker review, and with Berserker done, I can jump back into AVP with Randy Stradley's AVP War, which is a pseudo-sequel to Berserker. It brings back characters from that comic who kind of become a big deal in the Randy Stradley storyline, because they also show up in 3 World War much later in the early, like, 09, 2010, that sort of area. Can't remember when 3 World War came out. So we'll be jumping in between Aliens and AVP for a little while, going through those 2 Dark Horse AVP omnibuses, which end with an event called Xenogenesis. Xenogenesis is an interesting one because it's the first time we had Aliens, Predator, and AVP all really have their own event. So I'll jump back into Predator briefly to talk about that. Then we're going to go back and we're going to handle the Bantam era Aliens and AVP novels that I haven't covered. So everything from Genocide to Berserker for Aliens, and then the 2, I think it's Hunter's Planet and War. Hunter's Planet is its own original story, so it's technically not a novelization. It's its own thing, but fits in the AVP universe, kind of. So, then we get kind of interesting with Aliens, AVP, and Predator, where I'm going to tackle the DC Dark Horse crossover comics. Starting with all the Batman Alien stuff, and Superman Alien stuff, Batman Predator, all that stuff. I recently, in the last 4 months, acquired all they were reprinted in the 2010s. I actually used to have some of those, but now I own all of them. And we're going to be tackling those, and that should probably take me out through the end of the year, going through that. And it won't just be Aliens and Predator crossovers. There'll also be some Terminator stuff. I think there's a Hellboy crossover. There's a lot of stuff that gets crossed over in the timeline. And when else am I going to do it? I won't be tackling the Marvel Alien and Predator crossovers just yet. I'm going to save that for probably next year. So I just want to get all these 90s comics done by the end of the year. And then, like, next year we'll hopefully be into full swing with the Dark Horse Press stuff. The problem with the Dark Horse Press stuff, I do own all of it in physical print, but at this point in my life, I do more listening to books than I do physically reading novels. So it takes me a while to get through certain things. And I was going to be relying on Patrick Predator's extensive Alien and Predator audiobooks to get through the Dark Horse Press stuff. Unfortunately, with his channel being taken down last spring and being reinstated, he can't do audiobooks on YouTube. He's put some up on Rumble, so for sure At this point in time, I can get through Alien Steel Egg, but that's it. All of his Predator Dark Horse Press stuff is AWOL still, which is quite unfortunate. I'll try to reach out to him and see if he could prioritize putting those up, because I would prioritize reading them now and just filming them now and uploading them next year. I do that from time to time. So, moving on. So, that's all your Aliens, AVP, and Predator stuff. We'll move on to Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider, we're getting to the end of the comics. Even though it doesn't seem like we are, there are only probably 6 arcs left of this stuff. And that's not including the new one that will come out in August, which I will review as soon as I'm done with that third Colossal collection. I'm looking forward to that, by the way. It's nice that they're attempting to do stuff with Lara, especially with the Lau timeline, is kind of neat. Even though we have a unified Tomb Raider, which I don't agree with that. It doesn't make any sense, especially with Survive being so drastically different from everything else. There's technically I consider Tomb Raider to be 6 timelines, but they want it all to be one, and you can't even squint and think that makes sense. It really doesn't. So yeah, there's not much with Tomb Raider. I just got to get through that stuff. At some point, I will tackle the Angel of Darkness spin-off novels, maybe the fanfic Angel of Darkness novelization and its fanfic sequels. I've been considering that, and people have asked about that. I will tackle that eventually, but there is something else I want to get to in the short term, and I may go back and forth with Tomb Raider and this other thing, which I'll get to in a minute. But we got Tomb Raider, Narnia. We're on the last Narnia review, which would have come out today if I didn't make this announcement video instead. So we'll be done with the last battle. Will come out next Monday, and we'll be moving on full speed of for the foreseeable future, every Monday being Series of Unfortunate Events stuff. Since we're bringing back AVP, I can't alternate on Wednesdays, so it'll be thrown on Mondays. And we have not just a Series of Unfortunate Events, but I'm also tackling the Unauthorized Autobiography and the Beatrice Letters, as well as a little teeny thing I'll throw in the Beatrice Letters review, because they that review is going to be a little special. It's going to be a little different, because the Beatrice Letters are very hard to review. It's a very peculiar thing, so it'll be more of a retrospective of the fall of 2006, and just the waiting that everyone, in my age group, did for the end. And then I'll review the end. I'm not going to get into all the wrong questions. The Lemony Snicket prequel series, pseudo prequel series, because with anything Lemony Snicket, there's going to be pseudo stuff. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, all the wrong questions, but I'm not in the mood for that. After the end, I was just kind of yeah, I need a break for a while. But we'll get to all the wrong questions probably next year. I'll jump into those. There's only 4 of them. 4 or 5? I think it's 4. Because there's 3 main books, and then there's a book 2.5, which is kind of weird. So we'll get to that. And I'll give my thoughts on those when we get there. Anyway, so we got that. Punisher. Punisher's taking a back seat because we're about to get into the Shadow Masters stuff. And the Shadow Masters stuff is it's a lot. And I will, unlike with the previous, event stuff, this is a Punisher-centric story. So I will be tackling that, which it's kind of the last 5 issues of Punisher Volume 2, as well as like 5 issues of War Journal, but not the first 5 because that would make too much sense. And then there's a Shadow Master 4-issue mini. So I'll probably try to tackle all those in one review, or possibly 3 reviews. I haven't decided yet, but that's going to be an undertaking. So what the big reveal? What is going to take over after I take my break from Tomb Raider? And I thought real hard on this one, because I could have gone with the Nam. At least the first 40 issues have been recollected in that nice omnibus Marvel did. Was it last year? Early this year? I thought about doing G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, the Larry Hama run. But I decided, because it's looking like the backer kit is finally getting printed, we're going to tackle Terminator. Now with Terminator, I have to approach it differently than I have approached any other IP. Because Terminator is a mess. There's so many... At this point, Terminator's just a shit show of an IP, especially in comic book form. Believe it or not, that is the most convoluted of all the Terminator timelines. Because it may have been owned by the most comic publishers of any IP I have ever seen. So it isn't uncommon for movie IPs to go from different comic book studios. I mean, Star Wars was with Marvel, then it was with Dark Horse, then it went back to Marvel / IDW, and now some of it's done through Dark Horse again. Like, this happens. I can't think of a movie IP other than, well, I guess Army of Darkness technically, although Evil Dead 2 is owned by a different comic publishing company than Dynamite. But Army of Darkness is kind of always... Well, no, because the Army of Darkness movie comic was through Dark Horse back in the 90s, but when Dynamite acquired them in the mid-2000s, it's been with Dynamite pretty much ever since. With Terminator, the first comic series was with a comic company that I don't think it exists anymore. In fact, I'm almost positive it doesn't. It was called Now Comics. And they did an ongoing series that went for about 12 issues. And they did 2 minis, one of which is called The Burning Earth, which has been reprinted. It's the only one that's been reprinted by a different company. Then they went to, I believe they went to Dark Horse in the very late 80s. But Terminator 2's comic adaptation was done through Marvel. At one point, they were at... The Terminator 3 comics were from Bastion Comics, I believe. It was a company that started with a B that no longer exists. Then they went to IDW during the Salvation era, and they made a Salvation prequel comic. Then they went to Dynamite the first time. Then they went back to Dark Horse for a time. Now they're back with Dynamite, although Dynamite as a company is in a weird limbo. Anything Dynamite is like out of print. Like, they aren't printing physical comics anymore, which is weird. So we got this new Terminator comic. I say new. I don't think it's going anymore. I think it only went 10 issues. The first, 5 or 6 issues were printed physically and, collected in a trade. And the second arc's not printed in anything. It's really weird. And Terminator does this. So a lot of this stuff is really hard to get a hold of for a reasonable price. And unfortunately, a lot of it's not been archived in the Internet Archive. So like the T3 comics, I don't know if I'll ever get to those. Then most of the Now comics I won't. Um, but I will try to tackle the Dark Horse stuff because I have Tempest, which and the Terminator one shot, the first two stories that Dark Horse did with the Terminator IP. I have those already, and with the backer kit I funded 2 years ago, because yes, it's been that long. It's been a whole ordeal, and I'll talk to it about that in another video. I've complained about it before, so a lot of you are familiar with my woes of dealing with this nonsense. Um, but Dynamite attempted to reprint a lot of the stuff. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the licensing for a lot of this stuff, so like the T2 movie comics are not reprinted. The T3 before the Rise stuff, that's not being reprinted. Neither is the IDW stuff. And honestly, a lot of their Dynamite stuff is not being reprinted in these hardcovers they did. Well, the steel bound books, which are basically hardcovers with metal slip cases that we all purchased that have taken forever for them to make. They don't promise something you can't deliver on, like seriously. So what ended up happening is they printed most of Dark Horse's stuff, and then they printed the Burning Earth from Now Comics. And I believe the first issue of their new series, or last series, is part of it. But, like, a lot of stuff's been omitted. I don't know why it's been omitted, but it is. Like, Revolution and Terminator Infinity have been omitted. And they're owned by Dynamite. I don't know why they didn't put them in. What else did they... Oh, the Terminator Salvation, the Final Battle. Maybe the name Salvation, they couldn't... It's trademarked by someone. They couldn't get the trademark. But that's hard to get. And I know because I've been trying to pick up these trades wherever I can, whenever I can get them cheap. So I'm not just going to tackle these... I'll start with the what Dynamite ships out from Backer Kit, and then I'll go into some of the trades, and we'll do a big push of Terminator at the end of the summer into the fall. Unless in October I do 31 horror reviews of Halloween, which will be done different if I do. I'm toying with it. The last year's was not particularly enjoyable. It's not fun to review that many different things. I think the only way I can do another 31 reviews is to focus on one series, which would be Army of Darkness if I did do that, and just go through the Dynamite omnibuses they did back in the early 2010s, and really just go through all that stuff. And then see from there where I'm at. Because I don't know. That's a lot of stuff. I'd also probably tackle the Ash versus Freddy versus Jason stuff, because I do have that, believe it or not. It's so funny. I acquired quite a few of the weird crossover comics. Like, I went through this whole, like, finding a bunch of them cheap. And so I just picked them all up. Like, I just picked up Aliens vs. Predator vs. Terminator, which I hope to get to this year. It'd be fun to do AVPT. It will definitely be before I do Alien Steel Egg, because there's actually, believe it or not, some interesting stuff with that. Because AVPT is technically a sequel to Resurrection, which is utterly bizarre, but kind of makes sense for the time. AVPT came out like right before the AVP movie, which I may also tackle those AVP digest size comics. There are 2 of them. Um, I hope to that I'd have to see where they land. I may get to Thrill of the Hunt this year because that I think that came out before Dark Horse Press did the Aliens and Predator novels they did. Um, but yeah, after that, to get back on that once I get through all the Dark Horse Press stuff, then I get to jump into the '09 Aliens, AVP, and Predator Renaissance that happened. Which the irony is that Aliens is probably like the most bland of those three because they did three different series, miniseries, in '09. I think Aliens ended up being called Fast Track to Heaven. I can't remember. Predator was Prey to the Heavens. And then AVP 3 World War, which AVP 3 World War is the best one, FYI. And we can talk about how they just kind of attempted to bring them all back, but really Aliens is the only one that took off again. Predator, you got some interesting Predator stuff in the 2010s before the Disney acquiring happened. With the Predator Hunters series. There's some neat stuff. Plus, Predators came out around that time, and there's some interesting Predators tie-in stuff. So we did end up finally getting a third Predator movie at that time. And so, lastly, we have Star Wars. Where do I stand with Star Wars? That's what a lot of you tuned in for. We're about to... Well, I'm in the middle of rereading Mara Jade by the Emperor's Hand right now. That will come out not this weekend, but next weekend. Then we'll jump back into the Marvel comics and get through those, because I'm in the 80s now. Well, I'm in the 80s comics, like the 1980s comics. But I'm like at issue 81 of that. So I'll be flip-flopping back and forth. I'm toying with the idea of re-reviewing most of the Rogue Squadron comics, because I got through up until Requiem for a Rogue, so I got 2/3 of the way through the run before I just got sucked into doing other things. But I've never been a fan of those reviews. I don't like them. There's a lot of swearing in them for a Star Wars review, and I'm not okay with that. Now that I'm older, I just don't like doing that. I'll be rereading them no matter what. I'll probably tackle Shadows of the Empire Evolutions first, not because it happens before Rogue Squadron. In fact, it happens in the middle, technically. But because that's how Marvel wants you to read them in the omnibus. So I'm going to follow that. And plus, I'm so far removed from Shadows of the Empire Evolutions. Like, I could do with a reread. Plus, I already just reviewed, like, what was it, a month or so ago, I did reread Shadows of the Empire and Truce of Bakara. So, like, those are still, like, fresh in my mind as to how the character should be acting at this point in the timeline. So we'll see with that. Because no, I don't think anyone likes Shadows of the Empire Evolution. I don't think so. So we're gonna try to get through post Jedi up until at least Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor. That's going to be a hurdle because there is no audiobook for it. So what may end up happening is I go back into Tales for a while. Not Tales. Tales of the Jedi. Getting back into Tales of the Jedi. And Lost Tribe of the Sith. And get through more of those while I read Shadows of Mindor. And then you go back into Rogue Squadron from there. I should be finishing up the Marvel run at that point as well. And then we have like the Dark Forces stuff that I haven't covered, as well as Jedi Prince. I don't know if we get to Jedi Prince this year. It may be next year, but Jedi Prince is on the horizon. I'm already thinking of that. And I may tackle the fanfic Jedi Prince books 7 through 9. I have that stuff. and we'll see. It's very short stuff, so we'll take a look at it probably. But yeah, I'm gonna reach out to some of these YouTube audiobook channels to see if someone can make a Shadows of Mindor. There was one through YJK, but that's long gone now, and that's quite unfortunate. I might even reach out to other audiobook channels that don't necessarily do Star Wars and see if they'll do a Shadows of Mindor. I could really use that. That will speed up my reading substantially. So, anyway, this has been a really long video. I appreciate y'all sticking around.